This may sound a little gimmicky, but I will show you the science to back it up. If you're trying to lose belly fat, but your hunger always feels like it's switched on all day, especially at night, well, that is obviously not a motivation issue. But once you implement this simple protein habit, getting six-pack lean, just like my clients, starts getting easier. But before we jump into that, here are two quick caveats that you need to hear first. Firstly, the fact is that we store a larger portion of our body fat around the waist. So when something is off with your diet, your lifestyle, or your appetite, that is where it's going to show up first and disappear last, unfortunately. A lot of guys think they struggle to lose fat because they eat too much junk. That can be true, but that's usually a side effect of feeling hungry, especially later in the day. And for many, it kind of plays out like this. You wake up busy, you might skip breakfast or grab something light, then protein is very low early in the day. Then work can be intense in the morning, draining a lot of your energy. And you get to lunchtime, that can be rushed, delayed, or inconsistent. Then work drags on, your mental and physical energy starts to burn out. And by the time dinner rolls around, your appetite feels like it's peaking through the roof. And then late night snacking and grazing becomes almost automatic. And it's not all because you suddenly lost discipline at 8:01 p.m., but because hunger has been quietly building up throughout the day. And that is why a lot of people say, I'm good all day, but then I lose control at nighttime. This nighttime snacking or binging is usually what spikes the scale the next morning, even if you haven't actually gained any body fat. And this brings us to the second caveat that you need to know. So no matter what you do to lose fat, it's ultimately the calorie deficit that decides how much fat you lose and how fast you lose it. Even if you ate 3,000 calories of pure protein every day, you likely won't lose fat. So protein isn't some magical fat burning macro, but when your protein is low, your appetite can stay elevated. And you may think about food more and snack more without actually realizing it. As a result, protein influences how many calories you naturally eat. And there's a well-documented reason that your body reacts this way when protein is low, which I'll explain next. Researchers have tested the protein leverage effect by changing the percentage of protein in one's diet and observing what happens to hunger and calorie intake. The protein leverage effect suggests that humans have a strong prioritized appetite for protein, and when diets become diluted with too many fats and carbs, the body will eat more total calories to try and reach that protein target. You may have also heard claims that humans have a fixed protein target, but I couldn't yet find any evidence defining a single target or how to calculate that for sure. And unlike influencers who make crazy claims, my skeptical alarm has been ringing. So I did some digging and I found 3 solid studies that show us what is actually true. So one of the most cited studies was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition by Weigel et al. In 2005, titled, "A high protein diet induces sustained reductions in appetite, ad libitum calorie intake, and body weight." So protein intake was increased from about 15% to 30% of total calories without telling people to eat less. The participants naturally ate around 400 to 450 calories fewer per day, and their hunger dropped, which is quite a significant result. But I was still skeptical. A second important study, also published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition by Martins et al., 2013, titled "Protein Leverage Affects Energy Intake of High Protein Diets in Humans." They looked at protein intakes of 5, 15, and 30%. And what the study showed was that the high protein diet led to a lower overall energy intake, mainly from eating less at meals. Importantly, this study also showed that the appetite benefit did not increase endlessly as protein went higher. So once protein intake was no longer low, the effect started to plateau out. And this kind of result supports that first study we just mentioned. And now a third randomized trial published in the PLOS 1 in 2011, titled "Testing Protein Leverage in Lean Humans, a randomized controlled study," found that when protein intake was lowered to around 10% of total calories, people automatically ate more overall energy without consciously deciding to. So this doesn't prove that humans have a single fixed protein target. That idea is more of an educated interpretation based on patterns in the data. But here's what the evidence does show very clearly, that eating too little protein, especially around 10 to 12% of your calories or less, reliably leads to more hunger and calorie drift, usually from unconscious eating. So eating a moderate amount of protein, say 20% or a bit higher, helps to stabilize appetite for most people, and this is going to make maintaining a calorie deficit or calorie maintenance easier to do with less chance of unconsciously overeating. So from a physiology standpoint, protein has a stronger effect on the hunger triggering hormones like ghrelin, which explains why hunger stays elevated when protein is low. It also appears that protein suppresses ghrelin a little bit more than what carbs and fat might, and improves post-meal satiety, especially when you're dieting. So you don't need to try and hack your hormones. This helps explain why people who snack on junk food all day probably never feel satisfied, because those foods are very low in protein, higher in calories, and are highly palatable. So it's possible that the hunger never switches off in those cases. However, the takeaway isn't that eating more protein is going to guarantee getting your ripped six-pack, but eating too little protein seems to guarantee appetite problems, which makes fat loss harder than it actually needs to be. This can also be why eating clean fails for most people, because the macro ratio isn't optimal, and that's why this protein habit I'm about to break down works best. So you don't need a full diet overhaul or to try and choke down 3 ribeye steaks 3 times a day. The habit is to stabilize your appetite across the entire day, so you're not sniffing around the office like a dog for snacks at 3 p.m. or ripping open a bag of chips at 8 p.m. after dinner. The key is hitting your minimum daily protein target. If you don't know what your target is, you can figure it out using my calculator. Link is in the description below. But if we take an average for most men, the minimum is going to land somewhere between 120 to 160 grams of protein per day. And here is how I would implement this in real life. Always add protein with your first meal. Ideally 30 to 50 grams. That could be eggs, an omelette, protein shake, smoothie, Greek yogurt with oats or granola. Just don't overcomplicate it. Make it easy, right? At lunch, make sure there's a solid protein of at least 150 to 200 grams. It's like 5 ounces or more. That could be chicken, fish, pork, beef, tofu, plants, beans if you don't like meat, whatever it is. And even if you eat out, the first thing you want to think of is, what is the protein I'm going to have? And if you need to, ask for extra protein if there isn't enough in the meal you're eating out. Then at dinner time, aim for another 40 to 60 grams of protein. If you don't cook, simply ask the person who's cooking, or just get a $10 food scale off Amazon. This is what helps you feel satisfied and avoids that late night snacking bullshit. But you don't also have to completely cut carbs or starve yourself. That's not the longer term way to do it. One extra thing I've found that is really helpful, even though I don't have a solid study to prove this yet, is eating your meals in this specific order I'm about to explain. So first, you want to eat your protein, then you want to eat the vegetables or salad, then you want to eat the carbs last. I've found that getting that dense, high protein nutrition in first helps signal the satiety a little bit earlier, and it also takes longer to chew and digest that protein. So by the time you get around to eating the carbs, you naturally feel a bit fuller and potentially will eat a little bit less. Again, this is not some exact science, just my preference that I've been testing over the years. But wait a second, before you take this and run with it, and there's a few common mistakes that you need to avoid. The first mistake, if protein only shows up at nighttime, you're missing the appetite control benefits during the day, and usually hunger will just stay more elevated. So don't save all your protein for dinner. Start early. Second, protein bars and yogurt, stuff like this is fine, but having 3 or 4 of them a day isn't better than a proper meal. They're supplementary, not the foundation. So don't prioritize snacks over proper meals. Third mistake, most people think they're eating enough protein and they're not even close. If you're unsure, track your food for a few days. Use MyFitnessPal. It's completely free. The free version has worked to me for the past 13 years. Don't underestimate your intake. Even AI of any kind can help you figure out in 30 seconds or less. The fourth mistake, if your day gets hectic and the protein drops, do not write off the entire day. This is not a competition where you're winning or losing, right? Just fix it at the next meal or grab a protein option on the go. No need to stress and spiral into a doom loop of despair. Just don't make the mistake of being inconsistent on busy days. Fixing All these simple mistakes alone will make your appetite far more predictable and will make fat loss easier over the long term, which is what is required to get lean. It's not going to happen in 1 month unless you're already at 15% body fat or less, of course. But if you want help to figure out not just your protein minimum, but all of your macro targets and a diet structure that actually works on your busy weeks to get you down to 15% body fat or below, you can work with me one-on-one inside my metabolic recon method. That's how my clients get six-pack lean in their 40s, 50s, even their 60s. Training just 2 to 3 times per week while still enjoying dinners with the family. To learn more about that, tap the link in the description. And if you want to go deeper on fat loss after 30, watch this next video where I break down the fastest way to get to 15% body fat over 2 phases. Go watch this next.